when War Dog lands, you and Nagase go to meet Hamilton, and Grim meets up with Pops and Jeanette and tells them what happened, and they're like, well, we gotta do something. It's like, okay, we'll go to the base commander, Pero. He'll listen to us. And you get this scene where the base commander says he was expecting to see Pops and grills him about his past.
Special Forces Second Lieutenant Peter and Beagle. Or I guess you prefer Pops. 15 years ago, you and Bartlett were shot down over enemy terrain. Bartlett's Squadron HQ was destroyed, and all of its data was fried by Belka's magnetic pulse weaponry. When you made it back to the Allied front lines, it was Bartlett's word that convinced them that you were his squadron leader. Is that really true? Bartlett turned out to be a spy. So, who are you really?
Right as things are about to turn, the power goes out, and the three of them run out as Pero tries to shoot at them. But it's funny, he's just kind of ineffectually standing there, just like shooting after they've clearly run away. It's really funny looking. And then Nagase says that she knocked out Hamilton. The entire base is looking for them, so you have to sneak into the back hangar where Pops keeps his training planes, and you make your escape in those for Mission 19, Final Option.
So yeah, in this mission, you are in a training plane and therefore have no weapons. The mission is more of a story thing. It has a really good track to it, but pretty much all you're doing is you're just following Pops as he leads you out.
Days Combat Series really loves its tunnel missions. This is one of those.
Yeah, dying in this mission sucks because you have to redo a bunch of non-combat following Pops.
So, the 8492nd is revealed as Drawbox Squadron. Pops used to be in Drawbox Squadron, and he was known as Huckabine the Raven, which is a pretty awesome name. The best part of the mission, though, is when Chopper's dog will wolf at you, and it turns into a yes or no prompt. Yeah,
I love that.
That was so good.
Also, I like the detail that there's a scrapyard on this volcanic island, and like the radar's distorted, but Pops knows the way. Like, this is to throw off the 8492nd. Earlier, it mentioned that he flew away from the base with a bunch of supplies, so it's possible that like this is a place where he's scrapped stuff, so that's how he knows about this place. And then at the very end, you have one last very tricky tunnel, and here's the real upside of normal controls. It's not just that you can do good flying, it's that you can recover from terrible flying. I am astonished I didn't die on this, considering how much I was flying around all over the place. I was recovering from mistakes the entire time I was in the last tunnel, but I made it.
So yeah, you get through this tunnel, and Captain Snow from way earlier, Bo Billingsley, arrives and helps you fake your deaths. Sea Goblin from earlier lies to command about War Dog failing to eject. So at this point, the Osean military thinks you're dead.
You get a scene of them lifting you onto a boat, and they say, this will be your new home. And also for being this mission, you unlock the Hawk, which is the training plane you used. It'll have weapons if you use it again. And it's very cheap. It is very affordable. It's an okay plane. I like flying it better than the A6E Interceptor, which, again, is terrible, and you shouldn't use it ever.
Slightly before this, we didn't mention it at the time, but after Mission 17, you unlock the Su-47. And the thing about the Hawk is that it's very cheap, whereas the Su-47, while being a very good plane, is expensive. Really expensive.
What's weird about unlocking the Su-47 is you unlock the earlier Sukhoi plane lines, and you gotta fill up the kill rate for the Su-20 something to get another 20 model and the Su-32, and then the final one from that. Or you can buy the Su-47 outright, which is better than those planes.
Yeah.
I tried putting in some time with them, but I'm just like, why am I doing this? I'll just buy the Su-47, and it was a huge improvement. It's a very strange choice. I mean, I'm glad because the Su-47 is cool.
It's got the really cool, forward swept wings.
Yeah.
In Ace Combat 7, it's one of the few planes that can perform a culbit as opposed to just a half culbit.
I'm bad at flying, so I don't know what those are, but I'll take your word for it.
Basically like, half a loop or a full loop post-stall.
That makes sense. So this takes us to Mission 20, Ancient Walls. So War Dog's been taken aboard the Kestrel, which has not seen action in a long time since All the other pilots aboard the Kestrel have been killed except for Captain Snow. Pops talks to Anderson about his own past, and he was one of the Belkin pilots who was assigned to drop a nuke on his own country, and he refused and defected with Bartlett's help.
And he mentions being chased by a group of people known as the Belkin Greymen. And they also confirm that they captured a ship smuggling aircraft into Yuktobania, so which gives War Dog a perfect excuse to still have access to planes.
And I did notice the first time I played the game, I assumed they just gave you your planes back with this excuse. But you actually get 4 F-14A Tomcats for free. So if you, I guess, were struggling and didn't have a great plane to use, you get these 4. And the F-14 planes are pretty good. Also, they have the wings change position depending on how fast you're going, which I think looks really cool.
Yeah.
Also, you get a new theme for the briefings. The first theme had a bit of unsureness to it, but it's still cool. It had the slap bass. This one, I feel like any other game would use this early on because it's got a kind of like badass sound to it. But I like it here because you've pulled one over on the people who've been like manipulating and controlling the situation, and you're now on the offensive against the real enemy. So there's this more sure tune for this part of the game. Pops is the one who handles he handles the briefing, and then Jameson Price takes over because he's not a character.
Anderson has an intelligence vessel on him called the Andromeda that intercepts a secret message regarding Harling's location, which is Steer Castle, located on the border of Belka and North Ossia.
So you have to come in and help Sea Goblin infiltrate the castle and rescue the president while they're under attack by the castle's defenses. The other reason you get 4 F-14 Tomcats for this mission is that you have to take off using a carrier-based aircraft. This is the only mission where they do this, but you need to either use the F-14 Tomcat, the A-6C Intruder, so you don't use that one, the FA-18C Hornet, the F-35C, which is another plane that in this fictional world actually works, unlike in the real world where it costs billions of dollars and they pitched it without even knowing if they could build it, and they can't build it, or the Rafale M. The Tomcats or the F-18 are good choices for this mission. It's actually pretty straightforward, though.
I would recommend the F-14 just because like semi-active air missiles are really good if you can aim them.
The way they work is there's a circle, and when you fire a missile at a target once you've locked on, you have to keep it within the circle, but the missile will track to that target, and it has more range than the regular missile and kills in one hit. Actually, it's something I ended up using a lot on this playthrough, whereas before I was like, okay, you want the quick maneuver air missiles, the multi-target missiles, the high-damage bombs. I'm like, no, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah, semi-active air-to-air missiles are only marginally worse than quick maneuver air-to-air missiles. That's just because quick maneuver air-to-air missiles are busted.
So before you start this mission, you get another part of the poem. As the demon sleeps, man turns on man. His own blood and madness soon cover the earth. From the depths of despair awaken the Rosgrees, its raven wings ablaze in majestic light.
Still metal.
Captain Snow, not having any other people to fly with, finally has Warthog to join, and you are short a member, so he joins you.
Bo Billingsley plays the loneliest fighter pilot.
I also love, like, when you're in the hangar choosing planes, everyone has a line. Chopper would say, like, which plane am I going up in, Captain? And for Swordsman, he says, Captain, please choose a plane for me to pilot.
I also like that once he's in the mission, they do talk about Chopper.
During this mission, once Sea Goblin touches down, you just have to defend them. It's pretty easy, this part. Even on hard mode, this is like one of the easier missions. You get to hear Sea Goblin like narrating like a super intense gunfight. It is also like kind of action movie-ish, where you hear someone over the radio just being like, fighting with nothing but a banquet table between us and stuff like that. It's like, you wouldn't say that. But, you know, it's fun dialogue. I will say, I guess on the whole, this is one of the weaker missions, but it's not that long either.
It's pretty quick, I would say, because there's mostly only air-to-air combat until you have to break down a wall later on because Sea Goblin locates President Harling, and they need a wall to be destroyed in order to make their escape.
Jeanette hears word that the Osean army tried to take the Yuktobanian capital of Sinagrad, But without War Dog's help, they were locked in a stalemate. And now that you know who's behind all this, it's like Belka's got its sweetest revenge that these two countries are going to be in a war that lasts forever. The Andromeda receives an encrypted message sent from Euctibania somewhere with coordinates and a time. Harling realizes it's for him because the numbers within the message are the combined totals of his votes in his 2 previous elections he won.
So I'm not sure if this is a common thing, but does the president just remember the votes that they got? This was such a confusing thing to send.
I feel like if they made a big enough deal about it, Harling's shift to like peacetime was how much of a mandate he had to carry out his plans and that it was that popular.
Yeah.
War Dog becomes President Harling's personal air fleet, and their planes are given a sweet red and black paint job and a new emblem and squadron name, Rosgrees. And also all the planes look cooler with the black and red paint job on them.
Yeah, it just looks really good.
Yeah.
Also the emblem, the symbol is the face of Rosgrees as the hero. Weirdly, the next mission, they play up all this, but the next mission, Solitaire, is named as such because you are sent to photograph an active Belkan mine. So for this, you get no weapons, and you have to fly through an area with radar coverage.
I like this mission a lot, even though not much happens in it, because it's just so low-key.
You get a bunch of, radar bubbles on your radar. The lower you fly, the smaller they are. The higher you fly, the larger they are. So you're encouraged to stay low to the ground. While you're there, the Drawbacker Squadron is there as well, with some Euctibanian marked planes.
This confirms that Euctibania also has a bunch of ex-Belkan members in an aggressor squadron of their own. Both sides of the war are being manipulated equally.
Your special camera equipment have to take 1 picture, I believe? 1 or 2.
You need the mine entrance and the jet together.
Once you've done that, they realize you're there, and all Blaze has to do is get out of the area.
You can just ignore the radar coverage because they already know you're there.
But Grabiker is going right after you.
Once I took the photos, I just kind of figured, alright, I'm done here, so I was already booking it, so they were not even close to catching up with me. And then you get to the other side and your team is waiting for you.
The recon photos show that there's a presence of nuclear warheads inside the mine, which handily leads into Mission 22 closure.
From the photos, Pops realizes that disguised as Euctibanian and Osean fighters, Belka's going to drop nuclear warheads on both countries with the opposing fighters to make the conflict drag on even further. Harling tells them to destroy the mine entrance so they can't take any more nukes out of it. They don't know how many could have been out of there already.
By the time they get to the mine, they realize Grabiker has already grabbed them. That mine takes so many missiles to destroy. I don't know if it was on hard, but it was just so many.
Having beaten the Ace Combat 7 DLC with a super submarine in it, I still think the entrance of this mine has the most raw health of anything in the entire series. It'll probably take all of your air-to-ground special weapons, most of your missiles, and also your guns to destroy it. This leads into Mission 23, Ghosts of Rosgrees, where you get another radio transmission, and it specifies a Euctibanian canyon area along with a radio frequency. And when you arrive, you get a call from a man calling himself Alyosha. That's not his real name, of course.
I like that he had to clarify.
Also, I heard that line so many times because I failed this mission a lot. You are in a canyon, which is covered by Euctibanian anti-air defenses. You have to fly within the canyon to take out all these targets to stop them from finding these resistance members who are trying to dismantle one of the nukes that they've gotten a hold of. It's a bunch of intellectuals and students that have banded together to form this resistance. If you fly above the canyon walls, a missile will be launched at you. You can dodge it, but it's kind of hard to dodge within the space you get in the canyon once you've got a missile on your tail. There are these grooves in the canyon you can fly through, but it's really tight.
I love the radio chatter in this one because there's one student trying to disarm this nuke. They play it rather comedically, so there's 3 to 4 close calls where they might blow up this nuke.
Mm-hmm.
Alyosha mentions a he that says, like, a war dog would come.
Yeah.
Most of Razgrees is questioning who this he is, but they focus on the mission at hand.
After you've destroyed all the targets in the canyon, which it's not simple, like you've got to make a couple passes. There are also some enemy planes that are flying above the canyon that it's hard for you to hit them, but they can fire missiles at you. You can take them out, but they are difficult enough that you can skip them since they're non-mission critical. Though they did mess me up for the next part, because after you've destroyed all those targets, off near Squadron, the Yuktobanian Belkin Aggressor Squad shows up. They refer to you as the ghosts of the demons of Razgrees. They're not really sure if it's really you. And they split into two groups with 2 planes each, and they fly in opposite directions through a pattern in the canyon. They are hard. This is a hard fight.
I'd love this fight a lot, but it is incredibly difficult because you still have the low altitude restriction from earlier on.
I legit thought I might get stuck at that fight on my hard playthrough. I guess I gotta stop here just for the podcast, be like, yeah, and then I watched the rest and remembered it that way. Because, I mean, I don't normally fully replay games for the podcast. I've usually played through them and I'll watch stuff to like refresh my memory, maybe play a bit, try some stuff out. But I just got kind of pulled into this game again and played it all over on hard. This is the part where I thought I might not be able to actually beat it.
Yeah, this mission on Expert is really something.
Oh, I bet.
Once Off Near Squadron is, in the canyon, you gotta be, like, on your game the entire time.
This is actually the mission where I went for semi-active air-to-air missiles over the quick maneuver ones. Because the quick maneuver ones, they still can dodge them, because they're really good. Yet the semi-active, since it keeps homing in on them as long as you have the circle on them, it can home for longer, so it has a better chance of hitting them.
Yeah, also, like, the canyon is wide enough that you can maneuver, but, like, it's narrow enough that semi-actives don't have a whole lot of room to go off course.
And also you can do things like fire it and not have the target in the circle, so they can go past a turn in the canyon, and then you yaw a bit to the right and then relock onto the target. It'll turn and miss the canyon wall to hit them. Which I did completely by accident, but afterwards I'm like, yeah, I'm good. That's what Swordsman's saying on the radio.
I'm the true gamer.
Sorry guys, our captain's too good. I'm like, I have failed this mission 5 times. I am not too good.
With the defeat of Hofnir, the rebels successfully disabled the nuke.
Also, Hofnir, you defeated them, but they all ejected, so this wasn't the last you'll see of them. And Alyosha has a message from him, and he doesn't know his name, but he says he has a message for the squadron leader saying, hey kid, I hear you're a hell of a squad captain now.
The mission after this one is probably my favorite mission in the entire game.
Whitebird Part 2 is a phenomenal mission.
I mentioned that Hiroshi Okubo only did a few tracks for this game. He did Whitebird Part 1, and then he also did the track for Whitebird Part 2. And it's a much more pensive take on that track. The Andromeda has received an encrypted transmission in Belkin. A nuclear attack by satellite will happen in the city of Oktyabrsk in Yuktobania. And that satellite is the Arkbird, which has secretly been repaired and fitted with one of the nukes. In order for the Arkbird to change its orbital trajectory to target the city, it has to enter into the atmosphere. And you are going to intercept it in this window and destroy it.
Yeah, this is also like a really character-defining moment for Nadase. In Whitebird Part 1, she talks about how inspiring she found the Arkbird right near the beginning of the mission. Grim asked Nadase if she's okay with destroying it, and she's really conflicted over it.
But eventually she's like, the president will commission a new one once we have peace again.
While you're climbing to reach the Arkbird, an escape capsule is immediately launched from it. Enemy chatter reveals that an Osean astronaut was in the pod and sabotaged the control system.
It drops lower than they had intended to, which gives you just a slightly larger window. So the Belgians have modified the Arkbird. They have it launch UAVs at you, and also it will fire a laser at you, and if that laser hits you, it's an instant kill.
And to further confirm that Nagase really loved this project, she has knowledge of the Arkbird's blueprints because she has read them. So she asks the rest of Razgrees to focus on the booster in the middle, which is what the Arcbird requires to achieve escape velocity again.
They realize that they can't get back to orbit, so they initiate a plan to crash the Arcbird in Osea and set off the nuke there.
Nagase once again points to the cycle engines. So in a last-ditch effort, the Belkans switch to the Arcbird's auxiliary engines.
Then you destroy those, finally, and the Arcbird crashes into the ocean. The investigation team afterwards confirms that there's no radioactive fallout from the nuke on board. That mission is really intense, but also a little wistful and sad for being a mission where you can get killed by a laser instantly.
Yeah. Also really touch on the fact that these Belkan pilots were really willing to get themselves killed just to blow up a city.
The whole mission, you're basically flying in a straight line because you have to keep up with the Arcbird. And still, because of all the UAVs and the laser and everything, you gotta do some pretty tricky maneuvers.
Yeah.
That's what sort of makes that mission feel really tense. In my opinion, it's one of the best missions in the game.
Having taken care of that disaster, you get to Mission 25, Heartbreak 1. President Harling has been sending several broadcasts into Osea to tell them what's going on, but the Osean government there censors his messages and says they are enemy propaganda. So, he takes a helicopter to Auret so he can deliver the message himself. Meanwhile, they get a transmission from Bartlett with the time and radio frequency, and he reveals that Nicanor, the Prime Minister of Yuktobania, was also imprisoned, and the war wasn't his idea. So, you have to help Bartlett as he plans to steal an airplane in an airfield and escape with the Prime Minister. But you have to guard him on his way to that airfield and first take off.
This mission is interesting in that while you're trying to guard Bartlett, you're given the choice between a faster but more riskier area, because you're on a time limit.
And I always chose the fast route.
I don't know anyone who's taken the slow route, honestly.
I mean, it is pretty tight when there's a lot of enemies there, so it can be pretty tough, but I don't know, it's fun. It's more a game. Also, there's a woman named Nastasia in the car with Bartlett, and they're having this dialogue. It's like Bartlett's a cool super spy dude who's doing all these cool car chase maneuvers, and Grimm's like, I can't believe he's doing all of that, and Jeep. Nastasia's speaking with this sort of femme fatale with her dialogue. It's very silly, and it's much better than the car chase in Reprisal.
Yeah, you're not being made to wait for 4 minutes.
I feel like that's the length of this entire mission, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Bartlett gets to the plane and makes his escape. Grabok shows up again. Luckily, you don't have to defend this slow, crappy, outdated transport plane he escapes in, and Grabok is gunning straight for you. Of all the ace fights in the game was not that bad. It felt very straightforward. I mean, I guess it's nice because making sure you defend the Jeep this whole mission is tough, so getting completely ripped apart by an ace pilot squadron would probably suck a lot.
If it was off near level, that would be just dreadful.
After going through the entire game, you're finally given a chance to fight Grabaka in an equal footing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also pretty cool.
Yeah, once you complete the mission, Jeanette interviews Nastasia, who is revealed to be a Yuktobanian recon major and Bartlett's ex-girlfriend from 15 years ago. Bartlett was not at the POW camp because, while he was captured, he escaped inside Yuktobania and was never at a camp at all. Also, the line when Nastasia says to call her major, she has a really thick Russian accent for just that line of dialogue, and she didn't have it before and she doesn't have it after. I don't know if that's on purpose or it was just separate sessions and they forgot. But she has a disk that is encrypted so they can't crack it, but she knows that it has the plans of the Grey Men. And also points out the Solg in the sky, because the Arcbird had been delivering supplies to this satellite. It was made during the Balkan War by the Oseans to be able to attack from space, but the war ended. The Arcbird's destroyed, so whatever was delivering can't be delivered anymore, but perhaps it was already finished. And then you get to... This isn't the final mission, but for me is the defining moment of Ace Combat 5, Mission 26, Sea of Chaos.
In this, you're back with the Kestrel fleet. You encounter a big fleet of Yuktobanian vessels which is blocking their path, and Prime Minister Nicanor tries to get the fleet to stand down and seek peace, but the fleet commander declares him a traitor, and so the crew of the frigate Pitomnik moves to block that Yuktobanian fleet from attacking you. The missile destroyer Gumrak turns against the fleet and defends Nicanor. Anderson tries to get Nicanor to escape and meet with Harling. And this is all happening within the span of like a couple of minutes.
I do like specifically the guy in charge of the Potomac says, like, we don't know what we're fighting for anymore. They mentioned so many missions ago that this war wasn't even popular in Yuktobania. It's not popular in Osea. Now someone in the military is finally like, what if we just stopped fighting? Anderson tells Nicanor, escape, meet with Harling, get a televised picture of them shaking hands to reveal what's actually been going on. So he takes a helicopter, opposite direction, and Rosgrees and the Kestrel fleet have to defend the defecting Yuktobanians. Then when you take off, a song plays from the Kestrel speakers, The Journey Home, which, if you remember the mission, The Journey Home, they were humming this song. Now you get to hear it, actually. This song is, like, if you look at the lyrics, it's pretty corny. It's like the equivalent for My Heart Will Go On, but for a movie about planes in war instead of the Titanic. I told friend of the show, Devious Vacuum, that, and she said, oh, so Pearl Harbor. And I'm like, yes. So for the movie Not Racist Pearl Harbor, literally the first two lines are, their journey begins, starts from within. But I gotta say, I mentioned before that I got grounded. I said it was a pretty rough year. It was the worst year of my life. So when I got to this part, it's like, I guess this is how people who are really into musicals feel, where they hear a song and you're like, wow, this is the corniest shit I've ever heard my whole life. But it's like, oh, this is really emotionally affecting. That is actually my reaction emotionally to The Journey Home. Seriously, things that have made me almost cry. Nier Automata, and The Journey Home from Ace Combat 5 ahead of that.
It's a really good song.
Partway through the mission, it transitions from being on the ship speakers to like a non-radio, like really well done version.
Yeah, it goes from like diegetic to non-diegetic. This version is sung by Elizabeth Lebezinski. It's a sort of operatic performance, like it's very high register. And like the song, it's using the metaphor of flying forever as like, in war, like, can you find the answers? It's like, well, no, it's when you return home from war that you find an answer. The lyrics are actually co-written by Kazutoki Kono and Joe Romersa, who has a lot of production credits on a bunch of music, and also a lot of 90s anime dub voice credits. It's not super deep or anything, but at that time in my life, after going through something very difficult, having this moving moment, it was the right time for something this incredibly earnest.
One of Ace Combat's strongest suits is its like earnestness, as you said earlier. The game's at its most corny, but it's also, when you're in it, the emotion's just riding and just makes you love it a lot.
Yeah.
They do this to you at points in the game where like you've been with the characters for a while, so you're starting to grow kind of attached. You're sitting there like, yeah, this is corny as hell, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Throughout the course of the battle, more ships will defect to you. Some of them will be like, are you the Rosgrees? And you'll say, yeah. And they're like, yeah, like, you guys are awesome. It's like, yeah, you've been on the opposite side of the war, but they, like, respect your skill as fighters. Now that they're getting the picture that this conflict was manufactured, it's like, they don't blame you for doing what you did. Especially since you're now on the opposite side of it and you're saving their prime minister. Also, some Ocean ships show up during all this, and Anderson's like, well, we could try asking them for support. And then the communications officer's like, well, they were listening the whole time and think we're Yuktobanian traitors. So you also have to fight the Ocean ships. None of them defect. I think some of them eventually do, but like not during the mission. Also, Grimm's like, they're not listening to us, and Snow says, of course not, we're supposed to be dead. And like, you're not supposed to be dead. You're the most alive out of all of us here. We're glad you're here, but try not to steal valor, alright, buddy? But after you have finally defeated all the enemy ships, everyone else joins Kestrel's fleet. And that leads to Mission 27, Aces.
The disc they found has been decoded and lays out the Belkans have completed a weapon called the V2, a tactical missile that could wipe out half of the largest cities in Osea and Yuktobania. The V2 is going to be launched from the Solg, which is unmanned and controlled from a previously unknown location.
The Andromeda traced where the radio transmissions to the Arkberg were coming from, and they found the origin as being in South Belka, the facility there belonging to North Ocean Gruner Industries. The CEO, who has been making planes for Osea this whole time, is a member of the Belkan Greymen. The facility has a tunnel that's been dug under the mountain range that divides North and South Belka. As Pops is about to say what's in the tunnel, the Kestrel gets hit by a missile. So everyone has to rapidly abandon ship because they're unable to shoot down the rest of the missiles. The way the cutscene's directed made me think Anderson died during one of the missile strikes.
Yeah, it's so strange.
He's deep in the ship, so I mean, probably not, but like, it really looks like you see the missile and then it flies through the hull of the ship to Anderson looking up, and then the missile hits. He says, everyone else abandoned ship, launch crew, launch those 4 planes, no matter what. When you're in the hangar, you hear people in the hangar crew say, like, just pick the best plane, whichever one you want. This is the last time you'll probably take off. I wouldn't skip this one if I were you.
It's the coolest takeoff sequence. At that point, the Kestrel has taken too much damage and is completely abandoned. And so you did the scene of Anderson and Pops and a bunch of people on lifeboats looking at the Kestrel and saluting it as it goes down.
Anderson mentions when Jeanette interviews him, he's like, oh, I'm just the guy who's lost battle after battle. But then once the Rosgreaves take off, he says, like, after all this, I finally won. Because the planes took off, and as long as they're in the sky, we can win this. He hums the journey home. Jeanette's like, he was the one who put it on the speakers during the previous mission. It cuts to Harling and Nicanor. They declare that the war is over and say, the people who are responsible for this are still out there. We have people who are moving to end this battle, but we need your help. He asks members of the military in both countries to assist the Rosgreaves squadron. And when you start the mission, there's some people like whistling the journey home. And as you're flying into this area, other groups of Osean and Yuktubanian groups come in, like a helicopter team comes in, a fighter pilot squadron comes in. And as more people show up, they go from whistling the song to like humming it all together. And the final person that joins you is an AWACS from Yuktubania named Oka Nieba, which means Sky Eye. Which if you play Ace Combat 4 or arcade mode, you'll know that's the AWACS from that game. It's not the same guy, but just it means the same thing.
Yeah, he's a much more jovial Russian accented man.
Ace Combat likes to do this a lot. Like the Ocean astronaut back in Whitebird Part 2. That was a person from Ace Combat 2. Not the same person, but just the same name. One thing I like about Okaniva is he says, yeah, in my language that means like sky eye, and I think it's Polish and it actually means like eyes of heaven or something. But yeah, you must destroy like the defensive positions and the anti-air emplacements to let an armored team and a helicopter-based backups team capture the control facility on the underground passage.
They need to capture this control facility because the control unit for the Solg is in this tunnel underneath the mountain range. So you need to clear out all these emplacements and enemies so that all the different teams can move into place to capture the facility. They'll open the shutters, and you will destroy the core. So for the first part of this mission, you are once again managing targets across a large area. Pops calls and says that the CEO of Gruner Industries has offered a V1 nuke to any Ocean or Yuktubanian that will help destroy the Rosgreaves. And enemies from both nations come in because, if you remember, there were hardliners from both countries pushing for this war. So they're still loyal to that end. And also Hamilton shows up. He has gone completely off his rocker. He is obsessed with killing the Rosgreaves because he's like, it's your fault this war got dragged on so long. I'm going to kill all of you, I'm going to take that nuke, and I'm going to end this war myself.
At this point, the Sold is firing at you the whole time.
I never got hit by that. I mean, I'm glad, because there doesn't seem to be any indication of where it's going to attack, but it's mostly like to be scary that there are these attacks coming down so you feel more time pressure.
The tunnel's opened up, but they can only keep the shutters open for like a limited time. So a plane has to enter from both sides and hit the Sold control units at the deepest part of the tunnel. Hamilton chases you into the tunnel and Bartlett flies in from the other side. You're doing one of the most complicated tunnel runs in the series. You have to avoid shutters and obstacles in the entire way, and it's a pretty long tunnel.
Yeah, there's a new track that plays during this part that gets more intense as you go, and since you I think there's one part in the tunnel where you can pull a U-turn if you're really, really good, but you pretty much have to keep going forward, so as the track gets more intense, you're getting closer and closer to the control unit. And you're being chased by Hamilton, so you can't slow down too much, otherwise he will blow you up.
You get to the point where you destroy the unit and shutters will start to close behind you and in front of you as well.
Mm-hmm.
You fly past Bartlett, who is a huge idiot. Like, you did this part where he flies past you at like really high speed and just shouts at the top of his lungs.
This is such a terrible place to fail this mission 4 times in a row. Not that I would know anything about that, not me. Like, I was at the very end the first time I died at this part.
Oh no.
Once you get out, though, it switches to a cutscene of all the planes flying away, and Nagase asks where Hamilton is, and Grimm says, well, he was clipped by a ricocheting plane. And some people are like, wait, did Bartlett die? But it couldn't be, because then people would be really upset because you spent all this time trying to find out where he was and rescue him. I think what happened is that he got the plane that was chasing him, because he mentions there's a plane on his tail, to make both of those planes crash.
Yeah, but I do just love how aside it is. Grimm just casually brings it up.
Yeah, up he's dead. It's just confusing because you don't hear from him or like get any last anything from him. He doesn't even say like "good job, kid" or anything after it's over.
The mission ends with basically a shot of the soul descending towards Earth. It leads into the final mission of the game, which is a hell of a final mission.
Mission 27 plus the Unsung War.
The Solge was programmed to crash into the city of Alred in Osea if its control was cut off. You gotta take off from this Alred highway to destroy the Solge in midair, and we've only got 5 minutes before the Solge descends low enough to attack, and, you know, we won't have a big window after that. You get one last yes or no prompt after you take off.
Yeah, the entire team just calls out to you like, Blaze, Captain, and then you should say yes or no.
It's good getting you pumped up.
If you don't answer it, they just all go simultaneously like, aww.
By the time this prompt shows up, you only have about 3 minutes until the Solge enters the atmosphere. And both Ofnir and Robot formations show up, and you have to fight them off.
Yep, that's 8 enemy ace pilots.
And you're still being timed throughout most of it, so it's tight.
The Solge will show up, whether you are ready or not, once that time is up.
When the first formation of planes comes at you, if you have the XMAAs, you can blow up like 4 of them before the fight starts. Which is funny, because the dialogue assumes you didn't, and Grimm's like, it's 2-on-1, this is so intense.
If you're really good, you can destroy all of them before the Solge appears, and it'll actually give you a little extra dialogue.
Then the Solg appears, and the song The Unsung War starts up, which we mentioned earlier was a Latin chorus retelling the story of the Rosgrees. This track is... mwah.
It's amazing, yeah. Because it starts off with a low-key Latin chorus, before leading into a more hectic version of the same song.
Mm-hmm. As the Solg appears, though, Okadiva says, like, okay, Pops gave me the structural details. There's a rotating accelerator on the outside. There are multiple cores you need to destroy to make the Solg detonate away from the city. But the accelerator rotates and blocks these cores, so you need to time your attacks to blow up these cores. And also there are a bunch of other panels that will break off parts of the Solg so that it's easier to hit. But in destroying these panels, debris will come flying towards you, which killed me on the first time I did this mission immediately. Pretty intense final battle, but once you hit the last target, and it cuts to a scene, from Alred and far in the distance you see an explosion like fireworks go off, and a bunch of Alred soldiers cheer for the Rosgrees squadron. After that, you see the scene of like a park, and some text pops up, and there's an excerpt from an article written in 2014, so 4 years after the events of this game. It says that the identity of the Rosgrees squadron was never confirmed, though many believe it was the Sand Island squadron. But all the records about War Dog have been cut off since the moment Snow shot them down.
Harling states a year before that, in 2013, the records of this war will go public in 2020.
You see a woman in the park reading A Blue Dove for the Princess to a child in her lap. Cuts away, and Jeanette reveals that the Rosgrees never flew in battle again. And you see a shot of Kirk, Chopper's dog, looking up at a biplane in the sky. He goes to howl, flock of doves flies by, cut to credits. Another version of The Journey Home plays, with vocals by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. Man, what a good fucking game.
Yeah, it's an amazing game. Hey, guess what though? Puddle of Mud's back.
Yeah, the second half of the credits, it switches to Blurry by Puddle of Mud. There's a version of the song Rosgreaves that plays, and there's a longer one that's on the soundtrack that doesn't get used. And it sounds like it would have been perfect for this part. It's not a medley, but it does capture the arc of the story musically. But yeah, that was good.
That was a good video game.
I would say, like, coming off the high that it is that final mission, just the music is blasting and this is giant satellite just falling into a city and you're just there and everyone's cheering you on. It's such a high.
Aces is the sort of setup that, like, all of their Ace Combat setups are going to be judged by.
Mm-hmm. I played Ace Combat 4 after Ace Combat 5. Ace Combat 4, the story it has is pretty good considering it's a really arcadey game. It's told in still shots. The narration, upon seeing it again, it's okay. The performance of the narration's not great, though.
It's very monotone.
Yeah. That one's decent considering you weren't expecting much out of it. 5's, I think, is legit good.
There's some parts of it where you can see stuff coming a mile away, like, oh, who's this guy? And it's like, it's definitely Bartlett. Who's this guy? Well, it's definitely the president.
Yeah, but like those are... It's not like they're spending so much time thinking about it and they can't figure it out. Like, they're not people with brains.
The stuff that it spends time leading you on is stuff that you actually have to sort of think about.
Yeah, and your crewmates throughout the entire of it. They're all well characterized. You really learn to love all of them.
Yeah. Just like the way it sets stuff up. Like when Pops discusses crossing enemy lines with Bartlett, and you're like, it was hard to convince people that we were on their side. You could hear that and be like, yeah, that sounds legit. Also, the fact that Pops' name is Peter N. Beagle, and that's his fake name. When he went to another country, I'd be like, dude, that name's way too suspicious. It has the kind of details like that. The naturalistic way that they say people's names. The story's presentation on the whole. Considering I wasn't expecting a story like, I cannot believe how much I got out of it. And when I think about stories in the Ace Combat series, it's anti-war, but also you get the high kill score and one of your wingmates says, nice kill. Maybe you can see that as it trying to have its cake and eat it too, but for media that tries to do it, I think Ace Combat 5 walks a much better line than like Gundam does. Even though I love Gundam a lot, I think this one handles it better on the whole.
The general arc that most Ace Combat games is like, you start off as no one and become this grand, unstoppable thing that changes the entire war. I would say having an entire crew do that sells that a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's why it also has the best story, because there's always something grounded of people sharing the experience and reacting emotionally. Because in other Ace Combat games, it is just you ending up with different groups of people, and there are other people in the story, but they're not with you all the time, so you are kind of following multiple threads that come together in the end. That is satisfying in its own way, but it's not quite as emotionally affecting.
Remember how in Ace Combat 0, like, you're with Pitsy for most of the game, and then he betrays you, and then you're stuck with PJ for like 3 or 4 missions, and then he gets shot down? And then Poochie died on the way back to his home planet. And it's like, these are one game apart.
One thing I like about Ace Combat 0 that I think it does better is just setting up your primary foe.
I feel like instead of it being about like you and your allies, it's specifically about you and your rival.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting spin on it that makes Ace Combat 0's story engaging, but when you compare it to Ace Combat 5, you know, it's got a much more rapid pace. In Ace Combat, 5, you get turned into Rosgreaves Squadron at mission, I think 19 it was?
20, yeah.
In Ace Combat 0, Pitsy is turned into the enemy in mission 13 because it's a shorter game.
Yeah.
For that reason, I think Ace Combat 5 is paced better.
And there's some missions in there that are like, okay, this isn't the defining mission. Like, oh man, Desert Lightning, such great memories. In the pace of the overall campaign, it is dropped in at a very good point where you can just do a mission of a flight combat game and not have any monkey wrench thrown into the whole thing. And then after that, things go off the rails again. It's a really well-paced game. outside of the checkpoints and reprisal, like, I don't think this game has like a terrible weakness. And like Ace Combat Zero has, I think, one of the best final boss fights in any video game. Will never be beaten standard for games where you fly a plane. Most badass final boss track.
Unsung War is an amazing track that fits the gravity of the situation when you fight in the Soul. The Soul is not terribly difficult to defeat. Whereas in Zero, you have the track Zero, this amazing flamenco track. The whole time you're literally jousting in planes, and it's the coolest thing in the universe.
Ace Combat Zero, in terms of being cool and badass, it absolutely nails that. But then you get another cutscene of a FMV live actor who's doing really badly ADR lines. It's difficult to take seriously. It's enjoyable, but like, it's not going to really make me cry. Sorry.
This gruff-looking military man in a war zone talking about how he wishes he could go back home to the sky. And, oh my god, it's Pitsy. And he's ADR'd, and it's voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, so it's really kind of weird.
It's very funny. But when it's cool, it's really cool. And it's mostly cool.
To bring it back to Ace Combat 5, I agree that it's probably the most well-paced game out of all of them.
Out of the so-called Holy Trinity, it is probably the one that most deserves its spot.
And also in terms of the soundtrack, like, yeah, they all have good soundtracks. The Fives crosses a lot of genres, and also because of the story emphasis, the music is always fitting for the moment. That makes the soundtrack hit hard in a certain way, because Kimona from Ace Combat 4 is a great track. It's like a Cassiopeia song or something, like jazz fusion, going wild, got drum fills, sweet guitar solos. And like, the mission is good, but the music isn't especially good because the mission is especially good. The music just happens to be extra good on a mission that's also good.
Yeah, it's a mission that's all about dogfighting old arcade style. You literally just have 15 minutes to just go ape shit on some enemies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and his playing is amazing. If you told me that Kimona came from Top Gun's soundtrack, I would believe you. It's a cool mission, but like, it doesn't hit quite as hard as Rendezvous, which I would say is probably the closest analog in the early game. Rendezvous is this really like high energy, but still kind of tense track.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, they used it for the E3 reveal, which I think you should link in the post for this one.
And just linking the entire soundtrack also.
Yeah, just like the whole soundtrack.
I was just gonna say, like, even like the mission design in this game. I feel like if I was talking about a specific mission in this game, it's a standard mission where we have to shoot down things, and it's like, oh, and by the way, there's a jammer plane that's also dead that scrambles all your radar signals, so you have to go shoot that down. It's like, the mission design is such that if I'm talking to someone about it, it sounds cool to them.
Also, there's just more mission variety. Going from Ace Combat 4 to Ace Combat 5, Ace Combat 4 had a lot of missions where it's just go shoot down enough enemies at this point threshold, and then you can move on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Ace Combat 5, you know, you have all sorts of different objectives. There's some missions where you don't shoot down any enemies at all. It really did more with what could be done with the Ace Combat format. People like 4 a lot, but 4 is just a lot of shooting people down. If you took arcade mode from 5 and extrapolated it to the length of Ace Combat 4, it would fit, because that's how that game was.
Also, Ace Combat 4's like big speech moment in it is during the hangar section before the final mission, and it's also not captioned at all. And also the guy delivering it sounds like a total dork. Now we will take back our shattered skies. Like, why'd they get you to do this?
Nobody they could have got will ever stand up to Jameson Price.
Oh no, not at all.
No.
Honestly, I think practice you can get from playing Ace Combat 5 on hard with normal controls will actually make it more satisfying in a way to go back to 4 and do those missions where you have to hit a score threshold. Because now, instead of filling the score threshold within the time, you have the skills needed to, on your first run of those missions, go for the S rank and actually take out as many targets as you really can. That experience is, you know, it's an expanded arcade mode in that fashion as well, and I think it could be really satisfying that way.
Ace Combat 5, despite being the longest Ace Combat, is also one of the most replayable ones.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the ability to play very hard and expert right off the bat.
The process for unlocking very hard in Ace is just to finish the difficulty prior to it.
You're encouraged to play through it multiple times, especially with the kill rate system. You're not going to unlock every plane on the first playthrough, especially not the special planes.
So on replay, not only do you get the new difficulties, which you can play through the story mode straight through if you want to again, there's also an option for a mission mode where you can select a mission and play it on whichever difficulties you have unlocked. On mission mode runs of the game, a special named ace will show up on each mission that you can shoot down, and they have a custom paint scheme for the plane they are in. And then you can unlock that paint scheme. Because on your replay in mission mode, you can choose Ocean Air Force colors, Rosgreaves colors, and if you unlock the special paint scheme, that third paint scheme, which is usually much cooler. There's that aspect of replay, as well as doing the other mission route you didn't do before to blow up the other hangars. Once you've destroyed all 5 hangars, the last one was an aces, right in the middle of everything, so you'll probably blow it up anyway, and unlock the ADF-01 Falcon, which is a very sci-fi plane. The Falcon is very expensive. Like, I beat the game on hard, alright, I'll sell all my planes, still couldn't afford one. But that's for a reason, because it's incredible.
Oh yeah, the Falcon is absurd. It's one of those things that when you get it, you just use it and nothing else because it's just that good.
I would be bad not to mention that the Falcon has a laser.
Yes.
Also, it's got one of the coolest cockpits.
That's a cockpit view I do like because it has honeycomb pattern screen because it doesn't have a glass canopy.
It's basically got the fucking panoramic view from Gundam.
Yep, sure does.
And one of its colors requires completing all 32 missions in Expert just to get a nice little blue skin.
The way the laser works is you press it and it'll fire out a beam for a short while. Anything that the beam touches will almost instantly die. Like we said, it's incredible. But it's not the last plane you're gonna unlock, actually.
Yes, speaking of buying planes and them costing too much.
Once you've unlocked every other plane, you'll unlock this plane.
The XO2 Wyvern.
We mentioned the folding wings on the F-14 are cool, and the reverse style wings of the Su-47 are cool. What if a plane had reverse style wings that also folded out?
Then you have the XO2 Wyvern.
The other thing that's special about it is that it can fire 4 missiles at a time instead of 2 before needing to reload. That is useful on some targets, but it's more of a matter of nice convenience. But it is pretty cool that it has this unique feature, and it looks cool.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of responses through Twitter direct messages. The first one comes from @TheGreatSir. He writes, "Personally, one of the most interesting things to me has always been the Rosgreaves story. I think it's a really interesting example of Project Ace's habit of mythologizing the player as they play through the story. It's not unusual for the player to become some kind of figure of awe, like with Mobius 1 or Trigger. But I always thought it was interesting that Unsung War did this by showing your actions as being similar to the Rosgreaves myth. It kind of stands out, particularly given that all of War Dog gets that treatment as a team."
Yeah, I agree with that. Ace Combat 5 is less about you as Rosgreaves 1 and more about your team as Rosgreaves.
It's also remains a staple of the series. Ace Combat 0 references it. 7 definitely brings it up once or twice.
Yeah, actually the DLC is anchored around the idea of specific individuals being these factors, but again, it's centered around just your character, Trigger, and nobody else, even though there's characters who are there with you most of the time. They are canonically written off in dialogue by other enemy pilots.
Poor Count.
Yeah.
It's Trigger featuring his good friend Count.
I think that treatment's also interesting for your squadron. Grim seems like he might be annoying, but he's actually not. He is reasonably reacting to these ridiculous pressures and scenarios that he's in. Even when they're the legendary Rosgreaves, he's like, I don't know if I can do this. And it is funny to see someone react to being a legend, or not react in this case, and act as they always do, because no one's ever going to see it. No one's going to be like, actually, it turns out Grim was a big weenie who peed his pants or something. That's never going to come up. Nagase also is confident, but she's not so 100% sure of herself that she never doubts what's happening or whether they can succeed. They're up against some pretty stiff odds.
Yeah, even a Chopper's death just shows how, if they mess up, they mess up big time.
And the second response over Twitter comes from @StabMcClaws, and they write, good name by the way. Ace Combat 5 was my favorite game in high school. I used to play it over and over. It just seemed like everything came together so well in that one. The storytelling was absorbing, and it felt like my wingmates were really comrades that I cared about, even though there's basically no communication from the player character. I've played every title since then, but none of them have been so totally engrossing. That leads into our next discussion, actually, perfectly, about comparing this game to the other games. We mentioned 4 and 0 a lot. They're the other parts of the Holy Trinity, and I think we've made their case.
Yeah, I'd say, 0 is probably still my personal favorite, just because of some of the stuff that happens in that one. But 5, I would say, is the tighter, stronger game.
And after that, there was Ace Combat 6, Fires of Liberation, which is an Xbox 360 exclusive, so I have never played it. Different story credit, different translation credit, a whole bunch of other different credits that weren't on 5.
It's fun. It kind of overextends itself in the whole multi-front battle thing. So you have a lot of missions that take forever. You have to fight a whole bunch of enemies. Basically, it's a good game, but also it can go dance with the angels.
Yeah, that line, if there's any line you've heard from 6, is that line. And the fact that that's the anchor of the story is a little kid kind of misinterpreting her mom, telling her dad to go fuck himself, is the plot in that is kind of dumb. Not that, Ace Combat 5 is unimpeachable. Yeah, we mentioned it's corny, but, 6 is corny, but it also doesn't hit very hard ever. Your wingmate that's with you the whole time is really annoying.
I don't even remember what your squad name is in 6.
6 has fewer planes. We mentioned that every plane in 5 has one special weapon. It's kind of a cheat in 5 because some planes are mostly functionally the same, but they just have a different special weapon. Whereas in 4 and 0 and 6, you pick a plane and it has multiple special weapons. And 6 narrows down the cast to the planes that you would actually like using anyway. Okay, you don't get the F-14A Tomcat or the F-14B Bombcat. You just get the F-14D Super Tomcat, because that's the really cool one. Unless you have a Xbox One or something, it's not super accessible. It hasn't been re-released on PC or anything.
Yeah.
And Xbox emulation's not quite all there yet for 360 games. Also, the soundtrack is good, but it's not as good. The Liberation of Grace Mary is the big track from that game, and I was kind of underwhelmed when I finally heard it.
Especially because at this point they had used it in every single promotional thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
With 5, they used more of the tracks in the promotional material. Or in the commercial, they just used Blurry by Puddle of Mud, so...
And then you play the game, oh, this has actual good music.
Even 0, I think that first E3 showing used the track 0, but I think that's the only time it used it.
Not much of the music in Ace Combat 6 is terribly memorable.
And the last note about its presentation, I mentioned how 5 put in all this effort to do a high-quality CRT presentation. 6's briefings and stuff look like every other techno Xbox 360 era game. It's much less interesting to look at than the Ace Combat 5 briefings. They don't really feel designed. They are technically, yes, designed, but they don't feel like that was a consideration for how different they could be. In 5, there's a detail even in early briefings where once the briefing is over, you see the screen is off, the blinds are open, and you see the reflecting sunlight on the blinds as Pero is talking to you. That's a really unnecessary but cool detail.
The briefings in Ace Combat 6 look like a circa 2005 Winamp skin.
That is what those techno presentation games all look like on the 360, and also the 360 interface. Every iteration was a Winamp skin until the final one where it looked like the modern one. Who likes blades, people?
I like the blades better than squares.
That's fair, yeah. Meanwhile, on the PS3, there was Ace Combat Infinity, which we're only noting for historical purposes because it's been shut down. You can't play it anymore.
It was fine, honestly. It was not too memorable, and it had a terrible, fuel system.
How much you can play per day.
Yeah.
I gave it a try. Hearing the great menu music from Ace Combat 5 on the menus for Ace Combat Infinity, I started getting excited. And I started the game. The feel was kind of off. 6 and Infinity both don't run at super smooth frame rates all the time. I guess that became more common afterwards, but as a thing I associated with the feel of Ace Combat 5 was a bit of a letdown, but more so than that, it's that Infinity has like a short 8-mission campaign. I kind of wish they could incorporate some of that stuff into like a smaller, I don't know, digital-only release or something. If there was some kind of preserved way to play the single-player content and even the co-op stuff in there.
It doesn't take place in Stranger Hill, but it does use Stranger Hill elements in it, like Ulysses and Stonehenge, which I feel does make the real-life stuff more interesting and not as weird.
There were a lot of neat gimmick planes and stuff in there. There were some skins from the Idol Master. Those were also in 6, actually. You could get. That was very funny to me.
The Idol Master ones are also present in good old Assault Horizon.
But after that, there are the 2 PSP games, Ace Combat X Skies of Deception and Ace Combat Joint Assault. Skies of Deception is pretty interesting in that it's a game where you are constantly picking routes for missions. Instead of just telling someone whether you listen to a song or not, you explicitly pick a mission. It also introduced aircraft tuning to the game. For the original aircraft to that game, the fictional ones, you can add parts to them to tune their performance. It's a cool game. Obviously, it doesn't run as well as it's a PSP game, but for the form factor and stuff, it's pretty cool. You can only buy it physically, though, or play it on an emulator. I guess you can buy a PSP and jailbreak it pretty easily.
I would say if you really wanted a Ace Combat experience on the go, it works very well.
The next one, Joint Assault. That's actually another Ace Combat game set in the real world. It's got a bunch of single-player missions and a story that's just kind of whatever. It's called Joint Assault because there were a lot of co-op missions included in it. That was available digitally for a while, but they took it off the PlayStation Network while it was still on my wish list, so I played it by other means. It plays as well, even a little better than Skies of Deception, and you can now do the tuning for all the planes in the game. If you can find a way to play those games, they're really worthwhile portable experiences for sure. And, you know, if you play on an emulator on your computer, they're still pretty good. And then we get to Ace Combat Assault Horizon, which is a game that is so divorced from the qualities of what makes Ace Combat good that I thought a Western studio made it. But it turns out, no, Project Ace has made it. What does the Western audience like? Garbage.
Let's start this game with a turret section.
You gotta pilot a helicopter, you know, the things that die in a single hit. You didn't fly one and it's really poorly controlled.
Let me play through the rest of the game. The finale has to make up for it. Ace Combat finales are great. You just shoot a missile.
To make the fighting more cinematic, they had a new mode that makes you chase airplanes in like this close-up view. And you need to do this to kill a lot of big targets in this game. For me, like, because you're still fighting within the same system, you can feel how they are better than your other targets. Whereas in this, you go into mode that's specifically designed to make it easy to shoot them down. And it's also usually heavily scripted. So yeah, the last mission where you shoot a missile, you might say, well, I looked at that mission, it looks like you chase an enemy jet fighter. Did you notice that no matter how many hundreds of thousands of machine gun bullets get unloaded into the Russian guy who's going to drop the bomb on Capitol Hill, that he doesn't die until he gets to Capitol Hill at the most dramatic moment? Did you know that you can just shoot him at the most dramatic moment, like with one machine gun bullet, and he also dies?
This is also the one where they decided, okay, let's have a war journalist write the story.
Military novels.
Yeah.
And so the story and the script are boring. It is the most boring Ace Combat game I have seen in my life. Oh, the military dialogue is so accurate. It's like, yeah, boring. Accurate military dialogue is boring. It has always been boring. No one cares about it unless you're in the military, in which case you were already in the military to hear accurate military dialogue. How much accuracy do you want in your game where you juggle a missile at the end? I'm making that sound cool, but it looks really stupid when you blow up the missile at the end, too.
Yeah.
I guess we should be thankful, because it did actually sell decently and also reviewed well. I don't think it would now, but it luckily didn't change the series too much.
It does have the best QuickTime event, in that you have to do a QuickTime event to wave your hand, and you can fail.
It did also give us Assault Horizon Legacy, which is actually a remake of Ace Combat 2.
Yeah, what a stealth remake.
I mean, in Japan, its title is 3D Cross Rumble, which is a great title. It has more story than 2, but this is like the coup d'etat forces have taken the fortress. Take the fortress back. Coup d'etat forces have attacked the city. Stop them from attacking the city. That's kind of all the plot there is. Mostly they just add explicit references to stuff. They call USEA the USEA. It's not an acronym, but whatever. It's fun, it's got the plane tuning system from Joint Assault and Skies of Deception. Decent amount of planes to unlock. The handling's pretty good. You can use normal controls on the portable games, but I would not recommend it. It is so terrible to control a plane using the slide pad on a 3DS. It didn't leave a huge impression, but it was a fun and short game, and it's not that expensive nowadays either. And after that, we move on to 2019's Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown.
In my opinion, better than 4. Not quite as good as 5.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Part of the reason I thought to do this episode is I thought that 7's release might get more people to look at 5 because it's considered so highly. But like a lot of things in the show, that didn't actually happen. The 7's story makes a little less sense, is a little more abstract. Character motivations can sometimes be a little confusing or sudden. Kind of retreads some ground from 5 involving Belka and stuff like that. But the mission design is pretty great. You fight much bigger odds and the enemies are more aggressive, so it is a much more thrilling experience. Play it on normal even if you beat 5 on hard.
Yeah, Ace Combat 7 is much, much harder. I brought it up before, but you will be assailed by many missiles.
I hope you love that missile alert noise because, oh boy.
Most common track in the game is just hearing missile.
Luckily, they added some features to it, so like if you fly in the clouds, it will throw off missile walks. There are crosswinds in a couple of missions that can push your plane around. There's a mission with lightning strikes that can mess up your HUD if you get hit by the lightning.
That achievement is a jerk. I can't wait for that mission where I gotta fly through and it's like, oh, there's an achievement to get through that entire mission without getting hit by lightning, which is surprisingly difficult.
I guess I'm glad we're not an achievement hunter.
I would say the best thing 7 has going for it is it has all the best parts of all the games.
We mentioned there's the operation thing in 6. In 7, they're just mission areas and they don't explicitly split it up in operations like that, but they're just sort of different target areas you can go after. There's some score attack missions, there's some missions with specific objectives. The soundtrack, it's not as good as 5, I don't think, because it just doesn't have as much variety. Like, a lot of it anchors around the leitmotif of Daredevil, the big iconic song from that game. But that moment where the song kicks in is really good. Really, really good.
The best part about Daredevil is right when that part kicks in is also where the game checkpoints you, so...
It's so good, you wonder why there's a mission after it. And I like that mission a lot, but it's just like, after that...
You think to yourself, wait, this game has been suspiciously bereft of tunnel runs.
Yeah. Also, 7 includes aircraft tuning as well, and it has a new tree layout where you'll unlock aircraft parts, and then sometimes you need to get certain parts to unlock the next part of the tree, which might be an aircraft, and then you can buy the special weapons for stuff individually. It's pretty appealing.
I think we didn't really mention about 6 or 7. Multiplayer is a thing in both of those. Competitive multiplayer. It's really fun. It's also got a very high barrier to entry.
People who are good at Ace Combat are very good at Ace Combat. They probably hear me talking about, oh, this is hard and this is hard. No, that's not hard at all. I'm like, well, this is going to sound kind of condescending, but like, I play other games also. So I'm not really good at any game. So like, I don't know if the Nier community is really going to care if I'm like, I can do counterattacks in Nier. Like, I feel like that's maybe the only game I'm like good at. And it's a game where I was like, that game plays like crap. I hate it. All the fans like the story. No one's like, oh, counterattacks in Nier. Tell me more, Sid.
I just want to be like, hey, well, yeah, man, I'm not in the Air Force, buddy. Especially if you're going to play the multiplayer in 7, do not go for the highest bracket, because there's a point value assigned to everything. If you end up in the highest bracket, which means you're using a lot of really powerful parts on a powerful plane, then you'll end up with people who are using the post-game like super plane with the railgun, and they'll just kill you instantly as the match starts for easy points.
7's story also gets a lot darker than 5's does. You know, it's not as emotionally involved, but it hits you out of nowhere and it's not really dwelled upon.
The third act of that game is incredibly unexpected.
Yeah, I think it's earned. One of the more interesting things about the game, since it's set further in the timeline, is that planes, they have a selection of weapons on them, but it's not the same as it was in Ace Combat 5 because they're further in the future, so that laser gun that was on the Falcon is now on like an FA-18 or something. I think that one has the railgun, actually. But the fact that I'm saying this, I can't remember whether it's the rapid fire laser, the long distance laser, or the rail gun that is on the plane. But if you like the cool sci-fi weaponry bleeding into the setting, then it's got plenty of that too. Again, war is bad. Yes, we know war is bad, but also railgun.
War is bad, but planes are good. But drones are bad planes.
If a person's not in a plane, it's more bad than regular war with a person in a plane. But the most important thing is ending war so people can fly planes without war. But not commercial airliners. I mean, I guess it's probably not as cool to fly commercial airliners as to fly a fighter jet. I can see that. But you can also fly planes if you want to fly planes. Yeah, Ace Combat 7, it also came out at the very beginning of 2019. So it missed a lot of Game of the Year lists. It made some, though. And even though it switched to the Unreal Engine over the proprietary one by Project Aces, it still runs really well. Looks great. The ground looks good, finally.
Also, it had the biggest catharsis factor of any game in 2019, because prior to its launch, people were really excited for the Jump Force beta. Constantly getting on to Bandai being like, why are you talking about the dumb plane game? I want to hear about Goku. Yeah, how's that working out for you?
I mean, if you liked Goku, then you actually got plenty of good Goku games recently. You've actually been very well served if you're a Goku fan.
Also, I think we brought it up earlier, but the DLC is...
Here's some good missions, but like, God, they are hard.
I use the DLC planes to do the DLC missions. Like, this is practically cheating, yet I am getting annihilated.
Like I said, they call one of the missions 10 million relief plan because that's how many missiles it will take to take on that mission.
Also, the villain in that one's really weird. For all the times I try to give pathos or anything to the villains, he literally does like the wahaha laugh for how evil he is. Good place to open to our next discussion, because 7 in the DLC, the character who's like the anchor character for that story has an AI he talks to. They also mention the space program at the end and the war is over. And that is a good opening for them to go with a remake of Ace Combat 3.
Yeah, so Ace Combat 3 in North America, and I think also in Europe, got kind of a botched release. It trimmed a lot of the stuff that made Ace Combat 3 really unique. Took out a lot of the story. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere in Japan is a trip. The serial experiments lane of fucking Ace Combat.
When we say it removes the story, we mean this game did branching paths.
Yeah, I think there's, 5 or 6 endings?
Yeah, and only one made it outside of Japan.
Additionally, the game has a very cool, Y2K style fake internet in it. Y2K, the aesthetic is actually making a comeback, so now is the perfect time to redeploy the game with actually the same aesthetic. There are things like the story presentation is all still shot cutscenes, and the character designs are all anime style characters. It's not really in a distinctly Ace Combat style. So I think it would be a great opportunity to re-explore that idea and also tighten up the mechanics. It plays decently, but they've made improvements to the model, and I think utilizing what they've learned in a futuristic setting could work really well.
Plus, the entire story is about, corporate warfare, so anti-capitalist, it's a nice way to go after anti-war. It also has the luxury of not needing to use real-life jet fighters.
The original planes in these games look really cool. I don't really see why you need to license the real planes. I feel like Project Aces does think that real-life planes are cool. It's getting less and less popular to have those names show up on your games for good reason.
One thing we didn't mention about Assault Horizon is that it had a plane in it designed by the mechanical designer for the Macross series, and it's a pretty cool design.
Some fictional planes look dumb, but also the A60 Interceptor looks dumb. Yeah, I've been coming for the Interceptor this whole time. I don't care. Fuck that plane. That's what you get when you license real planes? A60 Interceptor? Looks like a penguin that fell over.
Plus the futuristic UAVs in Ace Combat 7 looked really good.
Also, like I mentioned, how many of these people were in Gundam Rise from the Ashes on the Dreamcast, and I remember when I was playing, this is pretty much the best original Gundam story that isn't a Gundam game. And they don't have to use the Gundam license, but I think they could do a game with big robots and use their world building skills, their mechanical design skills, all very proven talents they have, to make a game in that genre. Like, that genre had a pretty sizable comeback. Even if people cooled on Daemon X Machina a little, the fact that they were so excited about it in the first place shows you that, there's a place for those kinds of games. I think they could knock it out of the park. So if you want to play Ace Combat 5, the PS2 version, you can get it for like $5 if you just want the disc. And I will say the packaging, even though Kazutoki Kono worked on it also, it's pretty bland. Like, it's pretty straightforward. It's not that exciting to look at.
It's a plane flying towards you.
Yeah. If you want a complete copy in like okay condition, it's like $25.
If you want the PS4 version, you gotta solve the riddle of Anubis.
Yeah. It's locked in a cyber vault for no dollars. Maybe they'll eventually do it. They'll eventually re-release it on PS4 for you to download. Which will probably be $15. It's literally a port of the PS2 version. That's kind of stretched out. But yeah, even still, it's cool. We mentioned a lot of details about the game, obviously, but there's so much more. So much more dialogue and little things that we didn't include. We included some of the little things so that you know what they're like, but there's more. Like, there's constantly dialogue throughout the game. There's the experience of playing it yourself. Even if you know what happens, then you can appreciate the foreshadowing more. It's good. Go play it.
Yeah, go play Ace Combat 5. Play 4, and then 5, and then 0, and then 7.
0's kind of expensive secondhand. I think I got a copy for like $25 or something, and that was a super good deal. Like, it was absurdly good that I got it for that much money. Aftermarket prices fluctuate, because I said Nier got cheaper when we did the episode, and then it became $1 billion because people love Yoko Taro.
Also, emulate Electrosphere and get the fan translation.
If you want to play some games that are similar, maybe a little more accessible, Skyrogue is out on PC and on Switch. That's a game that like randomly generates missions. It's got a very lo-fi aesthetic. It goes on sale fairly often. And the PC version has a ton of mods, so you can play as a whole bunch of different ships if you want.
You can literally play as the Falcon and the Morden.
There's also Rager's Sphere 4th. You can get that on Steam. That game looks like someone just made a PS1 game run at 60 frames a second. It looks really dated. Like, really dated. And the story is told just by like anime characters having dialogue scenes for the briefings and during the missions. Mechanically, it's not as tight as Ace Combat, but it's still a complete game with a decent chunk of missions in it. For most people, you could look at it and say, this looks like crap, and I wouldn't fight you on it. After that is Air Force Delta Strike. This is also a PS2 game. It's by Konami, actually. Therefore, the translation's done by Jeremy Blaustein, who worked on Metal Gear Solid. I didn't get that far in it. Like, I liked it, I just got distracted by other stuff at the time when I first picked it up. I mentioned the route system in Ace Combat X Skies of Deception. This actually has something similar, but you also have to manage how much time you spend away from base before you head back to like resupply. Sometimes enemies will try to move on the base. Similar to Area 88, also known as UN Squadron on SNES in that way, but there's like an overall tactical layer to it. I mean, it's a game that's so unconcerned with being believable that in a game where the latter part involves you going to space, there's an old guy character who, perhaps looking for some romanticism in the midst of modern war, flies only propeller planes in space. It's a silly game, but I think it's pretty neat. It's not super expensive. There's also Aero Elite Combat Academy if you wanted something way more simmy. Like, there are options for whether you will black out from high G forces and stuff like that. Different planes have different capabilities, like, significantly. I mean, its Japanese name is Aero Dancing, and that's because there are some missions that are like flight competitions. I'm surprised by how not arcadey it is, considering it's by Sega AM2. That means the soundtrack is good, and even on its most arcadey settings, it's still much more of a sim than Ace Combat on its most involved settings. That's kind of a warning, but it's also kind of a recommendation. It's super cheap, but it's neat. Also, I threw Armored Core 4 Answer on here.
I actually have a copy of this game, but I've never touched it.
Its story doesn't hit anywhere near like Ace Combat level. Like, I'd say the story is maybe about as well told as Ace Combat 4's. It's a little more of an interesting story on the whole, but Armored Core is a series I think that could benefit a lot more from Ace Combat style storytelling. Like, I remember I was playing Armored Core Last Raven Portable recently, and like the setup for that game is so cool, but all the setup is done in these email like text file world building encyclopedia things. This could really use a person saying this stuff to make it feel cool. If you like fighting something that feels like the equivalent of super weapons when you're already in a giant, super fast robot, that's the game for you. So, that concludes our discussion of Ace Combat 5, The Unsung War. I want to thank Bohampscious and ICAT.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you as well.
So, Bo, do you have anything you want to plug?
I mean, just play Ace Combat 7. Like, get Ace Combat 7 to show them, hey, like, Ace Combat is good. And also, Jump Force, I guess. Otherwise, you can just follow me on Twitter, I guess. It's at Doc Hospital. I don't really have anything going on right now.
ICAT, how about you? Anything to plug?
Yeah, just definitely play Ace Combat 7, and I guess fuck Goku. You can just follow me on Twitter. It's INDESTR. There's no U, but CTIBLCAT.
I'll link it in the show notes. And you can follow me, as always, at BeamSplashX on Twitter. Like I said, all my tweets are good. Twitter has started using that one viral tweet I made that was inspired by someone else's joke format on like merchandise for stuff without asking me, so I guess it's official.
I don't know what better praise you can give to yourself than I was so good at a joke, it got stolen.
You can follow the show at ThoughtABTGames. Not that many tweets on there. You can look at the gaps and dates on there because it's pretty much just when we record for the show and when we're gonna stream. But if you follow there, then you'll know first because that's usually where I post it. I do also retweet it on my own account because I have more followers than my podcast will ever have because jokes are more successful than 2.5+ hour discussions of games that haven't been discussed, so they're not as popular. You can find the blog for this show at wethoughaboutgames.com. That'll redirect you to the blog page where you can find links to every episode with the episode art, links to any recordings, all the different places you can listen to it. Also, I think I still have the link for rating stuff on iTunes on there, but you can't rate a show that comes out once or twice a year enough that it gets high up in the rankings, and I'm not going to change how I do anything, even if it shot all the way up to number 1. That would be pretty weird if that happened, but I also wouldn't change anything.
Well, if it makes it to number 1, then it means you don't need to change anything.
Yeah, exactly. Knew I had you on the show for a reason.
Yep, not for the insight, just for the ass kissing.
So, thanks again, Bo. Thanks, ICAT. Thank you for listening.
Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
And keep thinking.